Welcome to Inside the Birds Pregame Live, presented by Garage Beer. It's beer tasting beer. Find yours at drinkgaragebeer.com. It's the final day of 2023, the final chance this year for Philadelphia Eagles and their fans to be happy. They can do that today with a commanding win over one of the league's worst teams, the Arizona Cardinals. I'm Geoff Mosher alongside my Inside the Birds co-host, Adam Caplan. Joining us, as always, former Eagles wide receiver Jason Avant, and from NFL Films, our tape breakdown guru, Greg Cosell. Gentlemen, it's not New Year's Day yet, but have a happy New Year. I hope the day has treated you well so far. Are you ready to ring it in with some great Eagles-Cardinals banter?
Do it.
Yes.
Let's go.
And as always, we have to single out the dedication that this man, Jason Avant, puts into this show. He is on the West Coast right now, as he is the sideline voice for Michigan football. Michigan plays Alabama, of course, in the college football playoffs tomorrow. So, Jason, out on the West Coast, very early for you. We always appreciate your dedication to the show.
Well, if you guys didn't wake me up this morning, it was no shot. Those players' predictions got me up. So
and here I was thinking you were just watching all these hours of tape trying to figure out your score and your player of the game.
I watched a few games of the Cardinals, and I wasn't too happy about watching them. It wasn't the most delightful film study at all.
Don't blame you. Well, look, the 11-4 Eagles would love to ring in the new year on a positive note, and that would be 2 consecutive wins coming off of a 33-25 victory over the NFC East rival New York Giants last week. And today they'll face the Cardinals, who last week lost 27-16 to the Chicago Bears. Arizona's 3 wins are second fewest in the National Football League, and their last 3 losses have come by an average of almost 17 points a game. And you may have heard this game marks the return of former Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon. He is now the head coach of the Cardinals. Adam, you might recall that his departure came with a little bit of controversy, as he had initially told the team and the fans that he was going to be returning, but then he left and then took some former Eagles coaches with him. And that really became kind of a big subplot to the offseason and what's changed with the Eagles on their staff and with their team.
Yeah, look, Vic Fangio, as we know, was a consultant for the team for a while. It wasn't just the playoffs, because the word we got is at least he would show up to visit the Eagles coaches periodically throughout the season. So he had a great relationship. Remember, he got fired from the Broncos, so he's free to do whatever he wanted. And he would visit the Eagles, and he got along and connected well with their coaching staff. And the Eagles were going to hire him as a defense coordinator. Remember, he's from the Scranton area, Wilkes-Barre area.
Right.
But he agreed to a deal with the Dolphins, didn't back out. And remember, the state income tax there is 0. So it's an advantage there. I'm not saying Vic did that. I know how agents think. But the bottom line is it has not worked out defensively for the Eagles in terms of their coordinator, as you know. And what I find interesting is Nick Rawlis, who's the defensive coordinator for the Cardinals, is calling their defense.
Yeah.
He's only 30 years old. And the Eagles actually interviewed him for the D coordinator job here, but he wanted to be with Gannon. And now I do wonder if Nick would have Nick gone had he not called the plays with the Cardinals, because obviously that more responsibility means more money. So we should always make that point. But it is interesting that Nick Rawlis, who did a great job of developing their linebackers here at such a young age, is calling their defense.
Yeah, definitely. As Greg will get into and we'll all talk about later, the Cardinals, they may not be very good defensively, but they do some interesting things that we'll all point out. Jason, I do want to ask you about the idea of a bad blood game. I mean, when you were with Andy Reid and the Eagles, there were a lot of guys, but Andy always had good relations with his assistants. It does seem like Nick Sirianni does not like to talk very extensively about the way in which Jonathan Gannon left. Do players get into that? Has this become a bad blood game for players, or is that not even in their lexicon this week?
Nothing that I saw says that Jonathan Gannon was offered an opportunity to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you have bad blood for a guy that, basically did his job? Some people, like myself, I'm not too, I'm never excited about the way that he calls games, but the one thing that Jonathan Gannon did was keep you out of the end zone. That's, that was one thing that he did a good job at. So I don't view this as a bad game. I think Nick in his press conference showed respect towards Jonathan Gannon. I don't think the players have any bad blood against Jonathan Gannon. I don't think that he deserves bad blood.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. I do think though that if he had not left, he'd still be here as a defensive coordinator. There was no kind of, obviously the time that he left them was a bad time for the Eagles. I mean, I believe if he had not taken that job, he'd still be the defensive coordinator today. Now that actually might make it more bad blood because nobody liked him when he was the defensive coordinator, but maybe now they're looking at it a little differently with all the issues that the Eagles have had defensively this year and with their coordinator change. You
usually don't fire your defensive coordinator after you get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
I don't know. If your defense coordinator is giving up a lot of points the entire year, your offense was just amazing.
Yeah, I don't.
Or I won't say a lot. I won't say a lot of points. We're getting up a lot of yards, and the entire year. I don't think anybody. It was pitch and catch for the Eagles all last year.
Well, certainly when they faced good quarterbacks, they absolutely struggled in both the years that he was defensive coordinator. All right, we're going to break this all down over the next 2 hours. For those watching, please share and like the show, whatever platform you're viewing it on. Hit that subscribe button. We really, really appreciate it on YouTube. If you submit a question for us, we'll try to get it answered live during the show. You can just leave it in the chat box on YouTube. Greg, we're going to get into this whole Arizona team, but I want to ask you to start off our big picture outlook here, just about Kyler Murray coming back from the ACL surgery. What does he look like on tape as far as what you would expect someone looking like coming off a major surgery like that?
Well, I don't think he necessarily looks different. He's a certain kind of player. He's, he's obviously a great athlete and he's got a very good arm, but he's kind of a frenetic player. It's very hard to really run a structured, disciplined pass game with him. So he's much more of an individual player, and he's capable of that at any time. And that's the concern you always have when you play Arizona, is Murray's capable of that. There's always the design run game element with him, and the threat of that often dictates how you align, and it presents challenges. But it's very hard to really run a sort of system-based offense with Kyler Murray. There's things he can't see. There's throws he won't make, not because he's not capable of making them. He's just, he doesn't make them. And he's not quite as precisely accurate as you really need to be, given the fact that he's, 5'10". So, he's an interesting guy because he can be special in any given game, but you never know when that's going to be.
Sure. We will get into him a little bit more later in the show. I want to shift gears, Adam, with you as we look at the big picture here. A big topic surrounding this Eagles team right now is the head coach and his demeanor, as last week he was seen sort of getting in the face of Hassan Reddick and then getting in the face of edge coach Washburn. Devontae Smith got in there, had to make sure everything's all right. And this is, I don't want to say it's a recurring habit, but we have seen over the course of his coaching career, 3 years here, where he's either yelling at somebody on the sideline or a player from the opposing team on the field or getting he said, I tend to get emotional, intense during the games. He addressed it this week in the press conference. Do you find this to be just give me what you think about this sort of trait, because not a lot of NFL head coaches have this discussed about them the way it is with Nick.
Well, it's also this town. We have to understand that everything's under a microscope here. So this is the way it is. But because that video got out, Nick actually did a great job on WIP this week. He was asked about it by Rob Ellis, and whoever was hosting with him, and he didn't run away from it. He explained that the way he explained it was great. The players can be a reflection of the head coach in terms of intensity and emotions. So if you're super uptight, your players might be uptight. You don't want to do that. So he said he has to be aware of it. Now, the other part of it is what you mentioned, Geoff, is that when you get into with your players, you have to make sure that you don't go over line, because there could be a time over his career that the players start tuning you out or not respecting you. And Jason could discuss that about the respect factor, because if you are disrespectful to your players and they take it as that, by the way, Matt Patricia, one of the big reasons why he's not the Lions head coach is the way he treated his players. That's a bottom line from talking to Lions. He tried, by the way, going into his last year, he tried to change. They told me it was too late. So you got to be careful understanding where that line is.
Well, let's talk about that line, Jason, because my own personal opinion, and I know that some people don't like it, but this is how I feel. I feel there are times he crosses the line and gets away with it because he coaches in a city that enjoys it and he's winning. But when you walk out of that Kansas City stadium and tell the fans to basically stick it, I feel like that's not something you normally see from an NFL head coach. And he does get emotional. And I wonder if he's not winning at a 75% clip, if that doesn't catch up with him at some point.
You just got to remember that they're your opponents, but they're also your colleagues. Mm-hmm. You're going to see these people again, right? Mm-hmm. So the Kansas City Chiefs, you're going to see Big Red again down at Dusty Road. And that's just ammunition for that team, because that's any coach or any GM, any fan will take that as disrespectful. And you don't need ammunition against you in this league. It's already tough enough to execute offense and to run a defense successfully in this league. You don't need the best people in the world at what they do extra motivated, right? So he has to learn that. When it comes to the players, some players get up for it. I'll say this. We talk about Matt Patricia and losing the players. You just have to be consistent as a player, as a coach. You just can't be a chameleon. You can't be this guy one day, another guy another day. If you're going to be a player's coach, be a player's coach. If you're going to be an ass kicker, be an ass kicker. We respect it because we see it every day. So if there's a coach that is very, very sporadic and you can't control, let's say, not Jim Washburn.
Okay.
Washburn's dad. I knew that he was a sporadic personality type. And anything could come out of his mind, out of his mind, right? So I expected that. So if I heard something, I wasn't offended because this is who he is every day. So as long as the coach is consistent with what he's doing, he'll be fine. Like, you never see Big Red get too high, too low. You never see certain coaches. Like, for an example, Sean Payton. He wasn't that demonstrative with Drew Brees. So why was he that demonstrative with Russell Wilson, right? So it gets a little tricky. And remember, these are grown men. I've seen coaches knocked out before. Okay, so there's certain lines you don't cross. And remember, everyone wasn't raised in suburbia, where you can say something and get away with it. There are certain things that you say, you step on a toe, shoe, something, you get knocked out for in some neighborhoods. And remember, you have to be mindful of that as a coach.
I think it will be interesting to see as his career goes on, and as the week before the Giants, he was giving looks to Pete Carroll, right, for keeping his offense on the field during a review. It looked to me like he was looking at Pete Carroll like, "What are you doing over?" So it'll be interesting to see if that stuff kind of comes back on him from a reputation standpoint. I also did want to ask you, Jay, real quick about the sentiment coming out of the win over the Giants last week. It was a win, although some players in the locker room did not treat it as such. We are constantly told by players, coaches, that a win is a win. They don't come easily in the NFL. What was your viewpoint on hearing players being upset, not feeling like it was a deserved win, or not wanting to talk about the win, or being happy about the win?
I enjoyed that, actually, because they underachieved that game. And yes, a win is a win in the National Football League. They had a 17-3 or 20-3 lead at halftime, and then and came out and gave up, the botch return, Jalen pick six. There was a bunch of things that went wrong in that half, and a lot of things were self-inflicted. When you look at the Eagles' drives last week, and I don't know if this is getting into the weeds too far, they had 10 possessions offensively. 7 of them were scoring, and the other 3 were their fault. So they were on pace to really put up some points there, but a lot of the drives were stalled, or maybe they had 11 possessions, but a lot of the drives were stalled because of them. So I see why they showed frustration offensively.
All right, sure. Little fire burning inside. So we'll see if that carries over this week. Time for our injury report. It's sponsored, of course, by Garage Beer, light beer like it used to be. Find yours at insidethebirds.com. Well, the Eagles have something that they can be thrilled about today, and that is the return of some key players, including nickel cornerback Avonte Maddox. He tore his pec in week 2. He's been out ever since. He just made it through his second week of practice, and he is good to go today after getting through it, being a full participant. So we'll see how much he plays, what kind of impact he has, and how the team handles the slot position and the outside position going forward with Bradley Roby, with their young players, and then when Darius Slay eventually gets back, we will see. But today we'll get a chance to see how much Avonte Maddox gets to play and how effective he is after such a long layoff. Looking forward to that. To clear room for him on the 53, the Eagles placed tight end Albert Adam
Oku Ebunam.
Very good. Thank you. On IR with a hamstring injury that developed at some point this week in practice. And the offensive line fully healthy as left guard Landon Dickerson set to return today after a one-game absence from a minor thumb procedure. Now, on the flip side, I mentioned Darius Slay. He's still out after undergoing a knee scope a few weeks ago. He has missed the past 2 games. He will not play today. Linebacker Nick Morrow will play after missing last week's game with an ab injury. The Birds were hoping to have both of their starting linebackers return for this game. Morrow is back, but Zach Cunningham still dealing with a knee issue. He's listed as doubtful. Sounds like, Adam, he's not going to be able to make it. And so it's probably going to be Morrow and Shaq Leonard again.
Yeah, a couple things. Doubtful means you're not expected to play. There's no guesswork. That's exactly what it means. So they don't expect him to play, number one. Number two, he was downgraded after the Saturday walkthrough. So so was Alberto, by the way. Alberto was added to the injury report after Friday's practice. And then they downgraded him from questionable to out, and then put him on IR by 4 o'clock. Because as you said, they needed to clear room. And now what this means, Alberto has to miss this week, week 18, and then 2 more games. So if the Eagles have to play in the first round of the playoffs, he couldn't play in the first 2. But the bottom line is the big story is Morrow back. Shaq Leonard obviously is there. So we'll see what they do, Jeff. You know, you and I talked about this. Would they have a rotation? Would they do it situationally? And I'd love to get Greg's view on what Shaq Leonard looked like soon. But it's going to be interesting to see because they've gone through so many different changes. Nakobe Dean's not coming back. So how are they going to do this? This is interesting.
Yeah, we will figure that out, and we'll talk about that. And also at linebacker, they elevated linebacker Brandon Smith from the practice squad for some depth. And just a reminder for everybody, unlike IR, with elevations, when you get into the playoffs, they reset and they're unlimited. So it doesn't matter if players are out of elevations, they can be elevated from the practice squad unlimitedly, if that's a word, once the playoffs begin. All right, let's turn the tables to the Arizona Cardinals. They're also without several important players today, most of them on injured reserve, starting with their flashy wide receiver, Marquise Brown. He's one of the NFL's top deep threats, but he is out with a heel injury and on injured reserve. Along with him on IR are tight end Jeff Swaim, 2 defensive tackles, Carlos Watkins and Lakey Fotu, defensive end Jonathan Ledbetter, and inside linebackers Kaiser White, the former Eagle, and Josh Woods. So obviously the Cardinals defense has taken a very big hit. Others who carried a game status designation are Kyler Murray, the quarterback. He was sick this week. He missed most of practice. He was able to get some in on Friday. He is expected to start. Inside linebacker Owen Popo is pushing through an ankle injury. Did I pronounce that correctly, guys? Popo?
Yes, and he's a starter now. Yeah, he is starting.
As a starter. And Garrett Williams, a cornerback, is also pushing through a knee injury. Both are questionable. Both were limited all week. Now, Popo made his first NFL start last week. Greg, you might be the only one outside of Arizona who is familiar with Owen Popo's tape.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the great Owen Popo?
Popo was a big-time recruit, went to Auburn, started for a number of years there. He's a smaller linebacker. He's a terrific athlete, but he was not really a great player at Auburn. He's a great athlete, and that's why he was not a higher draft choice, because the tape he didn't play to his athletic traits. Obviously, he had to play last week. There's not a lot of physicality to his game. He's kind of a runner. So that's really what he is. But they're down to him playing. Barnes is the other linebacker when they play with two linebackers. But they essentially started the year with White and Woods as their linebackers when they were in nickel. So they're now down to obviously backup type players. But Barnes has started a lot of games in the NFL because he was with Green Bay prior to being with the Cardinals. But Poe is a guy I think you would want to go after because, he hasn't seen a lot. And, I think he tends to be overreactive because his game is built on athleticism.
Got it. Great stuff on Owen Poe there. All right. Everybody else on the Cardinals good to go. So are we. We're going to break down this game. Soup to nuts, as they say. First, I want to remind everyone, as I told you, Jason Avant, he's out there on the West Coast. He's working like 3 different jobs, Inside the Birds, some other jobs, and of course, sideline radio for Michigan. This guy's not going to want to fly home in the next 48 hours and start making meals for his family, right? That's why he and all of us love HelloFresh. They deliver farm fresh food with pre-proportioned ingredients and seasonal recipes right to our doorstep. There's no wasting time at the grocery store because America's #1 meal kit helps make home cooking easy, efficient, and affordable. With HelloFresh, the shopping's already done. The ingredients arrive with step-by-step recipe cards. It really doesn't get more efficient than that. Plus, HelloFresh saves you time and money. It's 25% less expensive than takeout, so you get a home-cooked meal without digging deep into your wallet. And don't forget about taste and selection. They had chicken dinners, steak dinners, seafood dinners, vegetarian meals, anything you want. They've got it, and it tastes great. So go to HelloFresh.com/50Eagles and use that code 50Eagles, 50 Eagles, all one word, for 50% off plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/50Eagles and use that code 50Eagles, 50 Eagles for 50% off plus free shipping. Act now for America's #1 meal kit. All right. Let's get into this game. It's a brawl between the Birds, and last we saw the Eagles offense, guys, it looked a little different than it had the previous weeks. Not only was it functional and high scoring again, but we even saw some wrinkles in how they went about their work. Greg, what jumped out at you? I know you used in your show with Clay Harbor, you said something you saw almost made you jump off out of your chair from the Eagles offense.
Yeah, but
so what are some things you saw?
They only did it one time, and it was only the third time all year. But since they did it on their first, it was their first pass play, and they actually ran under center play action, and he hit Goddard for 18 yards. And I was thinking to myself as I was watching the tape, because it was only their third play, because obviously after the punt return, they ran 2 plays, and one was the brotherly shove for a touchdown. But they put Hurts under center. It was only the third time all season they went play action with him under center. I'm sure they were expecting zone coverage because they ran a flood concept, which you normally call as a zone beater, but they got man. They got cover 1, but McKinney was matched on Goddard, and Goddard ran the route he was going to run, which he was the intermediate receiver running the out cut, and Hurts made a really good throw, and it was a completion. But yeah, I was very, very surprised to see that. I had to watch it over and over and say to myself, am I really seeing what I'm seeing? I thought maybe I'd see more of it, but no, that was the only time in the game they did that.
I think they did it just for you because you've been talking about it on your show with me for a couple of weeks.
Well, I'm just, again, it's a personal thing with me, but I've talked to obviously a lot of coaches over the years. I'm just a believer more in under center play action than shotgun play action because I think it has a bigger impact on the defense. But again, that's,
Greg, you talking about
reasonable people could disagree with that.
You talking about the left sideline like a in the first 15?
Yeah, it was actually there because they had the punt return, Jason, and then they ran Swift for 12 yards, and then they had the brotherly shove for the touchdown, and then they started the next series with this play.
With that play, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. The left sideline. That was what we called a Seattle or Detroit concept. Yeah, yep.
I mean, it's basically it was basically I don't know all the names because every team's different, but it was a flood concept.
Yeah, flood concept. Yeah.
You
go in a little bit and then out to the sideline.
It's I mean, as you know, Jay, it's more a zone type call, but they got man.
Yeah.
Greg, with 12 personnel, the Eagles played a ton of it. Anything you took out of anything or any reason? I know you don't have access to the game plan, but for watching them every week. What do you think of that?
Well, first of all, they did it really a ton in the second half, Adam. The second half, they had 26 plays out of 12 and 10 plays out of 11. So it was really in the second half that skewed the numbers. My sense is, because you don't do that stuff on a whim, my sense is, without knowing, being in their meetings, is they felt they probably knew based on film that the Giants would play big nickel to 12 personnel and bring in the third safety Belton. My guess is they felt that that was a defensive personnel package that they wanted to attack, the big nickel. Again, I don't know that for a fact, but like I said, you don't just do that because you feel like it. You do it for a reason. So maybe Jay has more, a better idea than I do, but they predominantly got big nickel from the Giants. So my sense is they probably wanted that package on the field for the Giants.
And Jay, they did play a lot of 12 in the second half. They also ran the ball much more in the second half than the first half. So I'm wondering if you felt that they ran the ball in the second half out of 12 personnel, like Greg said, because of the matchup there. And what did you notice about the running game? It looked like there were a little bit more of maybe pin pulls and athletic movement up front than they had been doing in the past few games.
Well, I'll say this. I think 12 is a better offense for Wink Martindale, a guy that blitzed it. Like he got to a point where it was a blitz every play. He's a high frequency, blitz caller. But I thought after maybe starting that third series, he's like, forget this. We're coming after the quarterback. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was the game plan for him in particular. And when you really consider it, though, let's think about it. Are we better in 11 personnel than 12 personnel? Not.
Good question.
Have we had much production at a third receiver?
No.
No.
You know what I mean? So it's not like it's something that hurts us at all because we're going to target the same people.
Yes.
So
good point.
Yeah. So I don't think it hurts us. So if we can protect Jalen and allow his looks to be clearer, and him feel more comfortable in the pocket. If 12 is better for us, then I thought that was the decision that we made.
Jay, I thought, to stop you there real quick, to amplify your point, I had a feeling you might bring that up for this show. So I had our analytics expert, Sam Finkel, just break down the Eagles' success out of different personnel packages. Now, I'm not going to get into what defines success rate. I think we'll just use normal here. You were successful because you gained a certain amount of yards on each play. The Eagles were in 12 personnel 33 times, 11 personnel 36 times. So basically 50-50, but their success rate out of 12 personnel was close to 76% as opposed to 50% out of 11. So to your point, they were far more successful out of that personnel than they were out of 11. And that was for the Giants, at least, that was their best plan of attack.
Yeah, exactly. And being in 12 gets you more help when it comes to run lanes. We don't have, like I said, I've said this multiple shows now. We don't have receivers that move people. Mm-hmm. And it's tough to play the game in a way that gets your edge game started. So we need tight ends to do that stuff. We need tight ends to be able to combo up. We need tight ends to be able to secure lanes when it comes to running the football. So I just think that, like you said, we may be at a disadvantage at times in 11 personnel.
Jeff, there's also something to be said for lining up and running the ball. I think in the NFL, we lose sight of that because everybody automatically says it's a passing league and it's a quarterback league. And it's not an argument. I think we understand that, your quarterback's pretty important and you got to throw the football. We get all that. But sometimes you have to line up and run the ball. And there's nothing wrong with lining up and saying, here we come, let's run the ball. And they have a good O-line clearly. And, there's nothing wrong with lining up and doing that.
I think that they actually
doesn't have to work off a zone read or some kind. Gimmick's not the right word, but you know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's okay to line up and run the ball.
Yes. I think the only reason we ran the ball so much is because of the defensive coordinator's ability to dial up blitzes. I don't think it was because we just wanted to run the ball, just based on what we've done the entire year. I just thought that they were like, dude, this is not something that we want to fight the entire game, is him blitzing us this much.
I mean,
right.
Yeah, Swift had 15 for 77 in the second half, and all 15 runs came out of 12.
Yeah.
Yes. That was normally the formula that a lot of coaches like to talk about, because they passed more in the first half, they took their lead, and then they ran more in the second half. Now, it got a little dicey there, but basically that's the formula that a lot of coaches say. We want to pass to take the lead and then run the football later in the game when it's time to. And they ran significantly more in the second half, as you guys mentioned.
Jay's point's a really good one, because most teams, and Martindale falls into this category, most teams' pressure schemes don't come out of their base defense. Most teams' pressure schemes, or the higher percentage, clearly come out of sub. And if you get them in either big nickel or their 5-2 front, which is their other base front, you're not likely to see anywhere near the percentage of pressure you would if they're in, nickel. Now, they didn't play a snap a dime, so nickel was their only sub defense.
Right. So now, looking forward to today, the Eagles should not have an issue moving the ball against a Cardinals defense that ranks dead last in nearly every defensive category. They have the NFL's worst rushing defense, worst third down defense, and they've allowed the most first downs per game in the league. Adam, we talked a little bit about this. Jonathan Gannon took over the team. He made some changes, right? He kept Budda Baker. That was a big sort of question mark of the offseason. But there's literally no other talent on that side healthy right now that has appeared, as far as we know, in a Pro Bowl. So they're very much lacking in talent on that side of the football. I mean, when this might be, and we'll get into Greg's point about what they do, but from a personnel standpoint, it might be the worst collection of defense in the league.
Yeah, in fact, right now as we stand, they're down 8 starters, okay, from week 1. The only starters that remain in the lineup are Baker, Jalen Thompson, both safeties, and Zaven Collins, who's now playing as a rush player, whereas he previously played inside. So that's it. Their D-line's completely new. They've gone through 6 starting outside corners, which we'll get into today when we do the matchups. It's hard to win with like that when you don't have the talent. It's really hard. Like Brian Flores is doing a great job, but he's got better talent to work with than Gannon here. I mean, think about this. This is the most damning stat of all the rush stats. They're the worst rush yards before contact. Running backs are getting over 3 yards on their initial run, right? They're not getting touched until after 3 yards. That's embarrassing. Like they can't get any penetration. They're terrible. They're not competitive against the run. So, we've talked about it. The Eagles, they do want to pass the ball, but they could be more efficient when they run the ball, particularly in the first half. We told this against Minnesota, and I know Flores invited them to run, but you don't need to invite them to run. They can't stop the run. That's the point.
Yeah. Stop me if you've heard this before, but the Arizona Cardinals drafted in the first round a really super athlete and tried to make him an inside linebacker, and it didn't work. Go figure, huh?
Well, when you look at all of their drafts, none of the players are panning out, and that's all it is. They drafted how you say his name? The brother
Ojulari.
Ojulari. They drafted him. He's third team right now. Zaven Collins was a linebacker, stand up, hybrid type of player. He's in the dirt right now. Isaiah Simmons is on the Giants. Byron Murphy is not on the team. A lot of the guys they spend a lot of draft capital hadn't panned out. So you can imagine that, the offensive players, except for Trey McBride, hadn't panned out either. I don't know if you would say Kyler Murray's panned out. So,
Well, they did really hit on a linebacker a couple of years ago, but he's on the Eagles now, and he's a pretty good edge rusher. Hassan Reddick. But that's the point. So they drafted these linebackers, and they can't figure out the right roles for these guys. 3 straight between Hassan Reddick and Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons. So, all right. So again, as Adam pointed out, and we're talking about here, they do some interesting things, Greg, defensively that you wanted to get into. What is it that jumps out to you about what Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis, who is the defensive play caller and the former Eagles linebackers coach, what are they trying to do at least?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Minnesota, because in some ways they're doing something similar. It's kind of a college thing more than an NFL thing, where they line up sort of, including their slot corner, they line up 3 players at quarters depth. Now, sometimes they'll line up 5 players at quarters depth, including the 2 corners. But they basically their slot corner does not, in a sense, play over the slot. And they don't do this on every snap, Jeff, but they basically line up with 3 players at quarters depth. And that's kind of the way they've been playing. They started this about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And as I said, you see this a lot in college football, but you don't see it hardly ever in the NFL. And Garrett Williams had been their slot corner. He missed last week. I think he'll probably play this week. And he'd been playing very, very well, actually. He was an outside corner at Syracuse. He's a rookie, but he played well on the slot. So it's just it's a different approach than most teams that you see in the league. But as I said, it's funny you mentioned Minnesota, because that's kind of what Brian Flores did week 2, and we know that the Eagles just lined up and ran the ball. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the Eagles' offensive approach is, assuming that the Cards do the same thing. Now, in that look, Budda Baker's always in the middle. He's always the middle guy, and he almost always drops down to the passing strength of the formation when the ball is snapped.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that does seem interesting that as you mentioned, you take a player who's usually closer to the line of scrimmage as your slot corner and you move him back. Could be an invitation today for the Eagles to decide to come out
and run the ball. By the way, at a 5-man front. So in a sense, they're playing a 5-1 front, which, is again what we saw from the Vikings week 2, I think it was. And that kind of invites you to run the football.
Yes, absolutely. If that's the choice for the Eagles today and they do it with DeAndre Swift, it stands to reason he will reach 1,000 rushing yards for the first time in his career. He is just 12 yards shy of 1,000, and he's already topped his previous career best of 617 rushing yards. So Jason, here's what's interesting about Swift, right? He's been, for the Eagles, a workhorse back, which is, I don't think, something we've anticipated when they traded for him, and we talked about the committee and Rashad Penny. This is the offseason, right? We think it's going to be this sort of ground and pound or thunder and lightning type of combo, but Penny doesn't play, and DeAndre Swift has really logged the most snaps of his career, and a lot of people weren't sure he could stay healthy to do that. Last week, 15 carries for 77 yards in the second half alone against the Giants. What do you make of his role here with the Eagles?
I think he's doing a good job for what they're asking him to do. There's games, and he could have a lot more yards than he has right now. There's games where, they don't use him in the most effective way, and I still don't think that the Eagles use him at his optimal use. But he's taking advantage of a lot of lanes that the offensive line provides. He definitely is a slasher type of a runner. And before you know it, the only thing he has to realize is that he better get in before they get down to the 1 or 2. I'm thinking he's starting to realize that. Other than that,
starting to see a little extra fight at the goal line.
Yeah, last week he was fighting hard as hell to get in there. He was like, "Dude, I don't want Jalen to get this touchdown again."
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts is like Michael Vick and Mike Allstott all into one. He's just, he's gonna get them all.
God. Yeah,
that's crazy.
So I think that he's doing a good job. Like, the only thing I'll say that I think that they can use him more in the pass game. I think he's a nightmare matchup in the pass game, which they haven't used at all pretty much this year. And I don't know. I want to hear Greg's point about this. I think he goes down sometimes like a receiver.
You're talking about Swift?
Yeah, like there are times where he doesn't go through contact. He anticipates contact and is under it before it's made. And usually that's more of a receiver style thing where you can kind of predict that, I'm not going to win this, so let me get down before the contact. He doesn't just fall down like a receiver, but he lets his legs die like a receiver.
Well, I don't think he's a naturally powerful runner. That's not his game.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, again, I don't think that's innate to him the way he runs. Okay. But just if I could respond to the pass game, I was thinking about that all week actually, because I know we've talked about that a lot. But and again, he does not play in long yardage and on third down. So he's not their pass receiving back. Now, that doesn't mean they can't throw to him on first down. I'm not saying they shouldn't do, that's not my point. But clearly they believe Gainwell is the better player on third down and in clear passing situations. So Gainwell is that player in the Eagles offense, not Swift.
Which is strange because, as Adam and I talk about a lot, if you went back to training camp when you're working on things and your concepts, it's like they couldn't stop throwing the ball to DeAndre Swift in practice, and it made everybody think that was going to be a big part. And when we watched, he would catch the ball. So I don't know if maybe they went back and watched the tape and said, yeah, he caught it, but he ran a bad route. I don't know. Obviously you got to be.
It could be a pass protection issue as well. Gainwell is a very good pass protector.
True.
So it could be that. Or it could be a workload issue. I mean, Swift, is not the biggest of guys. He's not necessarily a physical player in a strict sense. We don't know the answer for sure. All we do know is he doesn't play on third down and in defined passing situations. That's what we do know.
Right. We know that, and the two make sense, right? So if I say, if watching tape of him, he gets down and doesn't always continue to fight through contact, and then he's not in there on third down, that would kind of say that they may not believe that he's that type of, physical back in order to handle that load. But that doesn't mean that you can't design first and second down plays for him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we all know the screen game has.
But it's only so many horses that in the stable.
Yeah. Sure. And you say what you want about Gainwell, he's a pretty physical runner, Gainwell. I mean, Gainwell's shown to be a lot more physical as a runner than I think many thought coming out of college.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that Gainwell and Swift are hyped to get the ball today against the Cardinals defense that's basically allergic to stopping the run. The Cards have allowed 8 different 100-yard efforts in 15 games, and 8 different running backs have averaged at least 5 yards a carry against them on double-digit carries. And the one that really jumps out, I mean, Kyren Williams of the Rams, he must feel like Earl Campbell when he plays the Cardinals, because he's averaged 8.4 yards against them on a carry on 36 carries. It's not like 5 or 6 carries. I mean, this guy gets more carries in 2 games than Boston Scott gets all year, and he averages over 8 yards per carry. So pretty incredible numbers there. Adam, getting back to Swift, I mean, he clearly fits what the Eagles were looking for. He's maybe given them more, right, from a workload standpoint than we thought. I know people have been asking us, what are the chances that he'll be back next year? How do you see this right now?
Well, look, a couple things. Our nickname for Gainwell is Grindwell for a reason. He prior to last week's game, he had been their closer, more or less. I'm not sure why Swift was. I was kind of floored by that. You would think it would be Gainwell, who's a little bit more of a physical runner, but Swift handled it. Knowing the Eagles, they gave him draft picks for this guy. I think they'll look to bring him back, but they're not going to offer him very much. Sanders, it never got to the even offer stage as we understood it, because what they do is, like with Jordan Hicks, I'll give you an example. When the Cardinals offered him $10 million a year, which is ridiculous, but okay, good player. The Eagles never made an offer because they had heard how much he wanted, and they said, thanks, see you, good luck.
Right.
If they find out from Swift's agent that he's looking for $5 or $6 million a year, they're not going to bring him back. Sanders got over $6 million a year. Now, Swift does fit, but let me get back to the pass catching situation. If you look at the targets that he got in the first 4 or 5 games, it started to match what we saw in training camp. But after that, it died. Now, I know Greg's right, Jason's right. Clearly, Gainwell's better in pass protection. But again, you can dump it off. We've talked about this for years. It's not like you could ignore the guy on first or second down. Even if it's second and long, you can still dump it off to him. And where are the design plays that we saw in training camp for him? You can do it on first down, okay? When they're not going to have their nickel package in, where they may not have the personnel. And by the way, the Cardinals are very inexperienced at off-the-ball linebacker right now. Guys are playing or should be playing. This would be a great opportunity to do some of the things we saw in training camp, which, quite frankly, really have not seen this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's you can call it role reversal. I mean, if you look at DeAndre Swift's career stats with the Lions and then compare it, he is averaging more yards per game, rushing yards per game, than he ever has in his career. But he's also at the fewest receiving yards per game of his career, just under 14 yards per game. That is just not one. That's something I didn't see coming. I thought he was going to be we all thought he would be the pass catching complement to a running game that mostly consisted of Gainwell and Penny, or Gainwell, Scott, Penny. You know how the wheel goes. So it just hasn't been that way. But hey, it's worked for Swift. I think what's interesting will be, how does the rest of the league, come free agency, view what DeAndre Swift has done this year. I think he's answered one major question as far as staying healthy, which a lot of people had concerns about. But will they view him as someone who can do this year after year after year with the workload that he's got? That'll be the interesting thing to see. As they say in free agency, all it takes is one team, right? Just to
Jordan Hicks, $10 million a year.
Yep, Christian Kirk. There you go. All right, we are going to continue to talk. Oh, by the way, Jay, I did want to bring this up to you because you're the one who brought it up about the passing game. This is supposed to be a West Coast offense, and a running back who can catch the ball is kind of a staple of what we saw for quite a while in the running back in the West Coast offense, at least from Andy Reid and Marty. So does that surprise you that the style of offense that they run, even though it's modified now and it's RPO centric, doesn't involve throwing to the backs?
This is not a quintessential West Coast offense in its structure.
Right.
The reason I say that is because the West Coast offense was not. It wasn't just one or two players getting the ball, especially on Andy. Andy's making sure the team is in unison and has camaraderie and that everybody's involved. He understood that concept. So therefore, you didn't have one receiver over 85 catches or 70 catches. There's a bunch of guys. And one thing I will say that, and some of that's play design as a head coach saying, listen, we want to try to get Quez the ball this game, or we want to get DeAndre Swift the ball. And sometimes your matchup will say that. If you go out and the Eagles are playing a healthy Dolphins team, and you have Jalen Ramsey out there, and you have Xavier Howard out there, and they have good matchups versus our receivers, a good offensive coordinator, good head coach that's an offensive guy is going to say, hey, we're going to play through the tight end and the running back this game. Those are the things that will happen. Our team doesn't do that. We go out every week trying to get A.J. Brown the ball. That's the crux of the offense, pretty much. And in games where we don't, believe that the defense can stop the first option, which is A.J. Brown, he's going to get the ball at a high rate, him and Devontae Smith. And also it talks about the quarterback's ability. Quarterback's ability to get to third and fourth, read, or know where the check down is. Jalen doesn't like throwing check downs. And Swift is, we'll get, Jalen is the check down. That's the way he plays the game.
Right.
Now,
all right. Good stuff there. Good stuff. We're going to continue to talk about this Eagles offense. Jason mentioned Quez Watkins. We want to get to him in a second. First, I want to remind everybody that it's time to step into 2024 with confidence thanks to Manscaped, where resolutions are met and hairs are neatly kept. As the new year approaches, why not make self-improvement a breeze by keeping your body well-groomed? Introducing Manscaped Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. It's the ultimate all-inclusive kit designed to help you feeling clean-cut and confident as you should. It features the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, a next-gen trimmer that ensures precision and ease when tackling your toughest hairs. So kick off 2024 with a trim above the rest and use the code ITB20 at Manscaped for 20% off and free shipping. I think we're all surprised the Eagles didn't win the Super Bowl last year. Maybe they just weren't feeling their freshest, but we can look forward to the future and feel our best with this amazing bundle. You got the brand new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, the Weed Whacker 2.0 ear and nose hair trimmer, and the essential aftercare products like the Crop Soother Ball Aftershave Lotion and the Crop Preserver Anti-Chafe Ball Deodorant. Remember, their 5th generation lawnmower features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, one for taking a little off the top and a new foil blade to go down as smooth as you want to go. And did I mention it's waterproof too? Also, Manscaped threw in 2 new gifts to ring in the new year, the Boxers 2.0 and the Shed 2.0 toiletry bag. Resolutions come and go, but a well-groomed you is here to stay with Manscaped latest and greatest. So start the new year right, because when you look good, you feel good. And as Coach Prime says, you feel good, you play good, right? So Manscaped helps you sculpt the best version of yourself for the new year, new you, and definitely a new trimmer. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code ITB20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use that promo code ITB20 and say Happy New Year to your balls. All right. Let's talk about this receiving game that we just mentioned. You talked about Quez Watkins and his involvement in the offense, which was very minimal last week, which might have been intentional. It's also last week against the Giants, the first time that A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert each had at least 70 yards receiving. One of the most balanced efforts we've seen from the Eagles offense since the start of last year. But Jason, Quez Watkins played 1 snap and you found that one snap while you were watching tape and saw something that you didn't like. What was that?
Boston Scott had that one carry in the game, and literally, I don't know if he would have scored, but he would have been out the gate. He would have had a 40-yard run, and Quez Watkins had to get the safety. He was on the left side. He was in the game for what looked like, just a routine. I'm going to get the safety. He turns down the safety. The safety staring right at him. He had him. He goes to the cornerback, leaves the safety unblocked. Therefore, it threw off the timing of the play. But if he goes and blocks the safety, they have a man for the cornerback, Jason Kelsey, picks up the inside linebacker, and Boston Scott is out of the gate. Those are the types of things that keep Quez Watkins off the field. You can depend on him. If you throw the ball down the field, you can depend on him in the run game. He can get offensive plays started on the edge. There's a lot of things that he's doing that, you just don't think a guy with a contract on the line, the opportunity to continue his career in the NFL, he's doing things that just doesn't make sense to me.
Jason, do you see it as a former player that coaches, how could they possibly have confidence in him? As you just described, the issues, you think he gets benched going forward?
It's hard to bench speed. And that's the thing about it. When you run a 4.35 or 4.34, whatever Quez runs, those guys get unlimited chances. It's like the pretty woman. She can get married 7 times. If you're not so pretty, you get one shot and that's it.
Okay.
That's how it is. That's how it is.
Yeah, but what if she has a nice personality?
the personality thing.
Let's go through the scouting report now.
Hey, Greg, I was a high character guy, and that's like having a good personality.
Chief from a slot receiver is what you're telling us.
You still get cut, and you can't run fast.
I'm trying to think, how does this get back to Quez Watkins again?
Right, so I threw you off. What I'm saying is that he gets more opportunities than most. Yeah. But eventually the door closes, never to be reopened again. And you can't, you got to create a path for yourself. You don't return kicks. You don't catch punts. You're not fighting for the ball when it's down the field. You can't get something started, like a screen start on the outside, and you're not picking up people in the blocking game. Like,
Right. Well,
they only can say you look good for so long.
Sure. Now we could sit here, Jay. We could sit here and say, well, look, he didn't play a lot because they played a lot of 12 personnel. But even if you break down their 11 personnel from last week, you saw more snaps from Julio Jones and more snaps for Olamide Zaccheaus than they have played. So you wonder if there's a changing of the slot going on. But then you fast forward to today, Adam. I mean, the corner, to Jason's point, look at the Arizona cornerback situation. I could definitely understand if the Eagles still said, you know what, speed's our strength here.
Yeah, if you look at the Cardinal situation at outside corner, they've started a minimum of 6 guys this season. The 2 guys are starting now. Sterling Thomas, he was claimed off waivers from the Lions in August. He's an undrafted free agent. And if you really follow league, you might remember Antonio Hamilton with the Giants, the Bucks, Steelers. He's now been on 6 teams. He should be a 4th corner. He's starting. Why? Because they don't have anyone else. They've either the players who were starting before, like Marco Wilson, by the way, who was a starter, who's been with them for a while. They cut him. And this is what typically happens when you have a new coaching staff who runs different schemes. And also you have a new general manager, Monty Ossenfort. So they're just searching, or using a Cosell term, they're grasping. They're groping. They're trying to figure it out. And this is what happens. And as you said, Geoff, very well, the Eagles, and we talked about this on our Friday show, our previous show, the Eagles can literally do whatever they want. If they want to come out running the ball 30 times, they should have 200 to 300 yards. If they want to come out passing, but they're actually, believe this or not, we get access to the stuff. The Eagles are actually in the middle of first half passes. Last year, they were in the top 10. They're not passing them as much as you think of the first half. Now, again, it's situational. How much are they up and not up? But if they want to run the ball today, they will crush the Cardinals. The Cardinals are starting 3 guys on their D front who are either not with the football team, who are not starting or not playing in week 1. Again, bad personnel. That's why they have 3 wins.
Yeah, I mean, this team just lost pretty badly to the Chicago Bears, who are not exactly the 85 Bears. So
hold on though. They scored a lot of points on the 49ers. They
did.
in there with the
Hey,
Ravens.
they went into Pittsburgh. They went in Pittsburgh. I agree. I'm with you. They're feisty. They're feisty. You can't take them like they beat. All right, so let's take. That's a great point. Cowboys. They lost very early in the year. They lost a game that people say it doesn't matter how bad you are, you can't lose that game. They were up on the Giants, I think 21-0 before they lost that game, something like 28-21.
Yeah.
And as bad as that loss was, they came back the following week and beat the Cowboys, if I'm not mistaken, right after that. And then a couple of weeks ago, they went into Pittsburgh, which is not an easy place to win, and beat the Steelers. So there's some feistiness here, and I don't want to discredit them. But Greg, we were just talking about their cornerback situation. I mean, it's really not ideal. I would think that the defense that you described that they tend to play might help them try to keep teams from going way over the top on them. Having that extra slot back.
They play Thomas at boundary corner, Hamilton at field corner. That's what they've done the last number of weeks. These two guys have played for the last number of weeks as starting outside corners. And as I said, Garrett Williams had been their slot. He did not play last week, but I think he'll play this week. So last week they ended up playing big nickel kind of as their foundation personnel package because they really didn't have, I guess, another corner they felt good about putting on the field.
Yikes.
But I think Williams will be back from what I gather. So I don't know more about that, but I think he'll be back. So he'll play in the slot, and he actually had been playing well.
Okay.
So we'll see. I mean, in an ideal world, we know this. You don't want Thomas, who's a freakish athlete, but was an undrafted player coming out of college. You don't want Thomas and Hamilton to be your outside corners.
Right.
So Geoff.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, they have another kid, number 13, Catrell Clark. He was starting earlier. He got benched.
Yep.
Andre Sachare is one of their backup safeties who also plays special teams.
He played this past week in their big
Yep.
Yeah.
I always liked Andre Sachare.
We'll look for that. And also, let's not forget that they were basically just putting guys out there. Do you know who started at safety for them earlier in the season?
Devon Wallace.
Yep. Yeah. That's where they were at, guys. This is a turnaround program.
Yeah.
Most of Steve Keim's draft picks, majority of them have not worked out. A couple of them have, but most have not. This is what happens. They're totally in a start over program here.
100%. Real quick before we wrap it up on the Eagles offense, Jay, when we've seen Julio Jones, we're seeing him mostly as an inside slot receiver in their 11 personnel. We saw more snaps of him last week than before. Do you watch that and think that is where he should be? Because that's not where he played for most of his career. I get it. He's not the same player, but.
No, I think that Julio, well, it all depends, like I said. So I think that he's going to be better served outside. I think Devontae Smith is your slot guy. If you look at what Dallas is doing with CeeDee Lamb and how they're motioning him and using him in a slot a bunch, and Devontae Smith can do that and do it better than CeeDee Lamb could if they use him in that capacity. But yes, I would view him as an outside player, but I understand why they're doing it in certain ways, right? So the way the play structure works is that you put the guys in position that you want to get the football, and that third guy is what the term originally came from with Walsh is offense, is that third position is called the adjuster. Now, we can tag him zebra, we can tag him whatever it is, but the position in the playbook, the original playbook, is adjuster. He adjusts to everything else. So you can move him outside, he can be in the backfield, the full back, the second tight end. It's all the same position. It's just that he moves based on who you want to get the ball. And but yes, I think he should be outside, but I just think that they're just deploying him in a way that's going to get A.J. Brown the most touches. That's what I think.
All right.
I would say that's very fair, and I don't think you're going to see a lot of motion.
We know that. Yeah.
Yes.
It'll do it.
All right. Good stuff. That's they'll do it for Eagles offense against this Cardinals defense. We're going to pause for a moment to hear from our friends at Sky Motor Cars and the voice of the Eagles, Mr. Merrill Reese.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schulter, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
Okay, hour 2 of Inside the Birds pregame live. Geoff Mosher with Adam Caplan, and of course, joining us as always, former Eagles wide receiver Jason Avant, and from NFL Films, Greg Cosell. The Eagles are double-digit favorites today for the second straight week from our friends at mybookie.ag. Now, it was 10.5 points for most of the week. It has jumped to 12.5-point favorites with an over-under of 48. There was a point in which it was locked. I guess they were wondering about Kyler Murray's status, but as we expect him to start and play for the Cardinals, it went up to 12.5. And interestingly, that's a little bit lower of a line than the 13.5 last week at home against the Giants, who had won 3 or 4 games going into that game. So I find that a little bit interesting. Jason, I am wondering this. When you are a playoff team that has already clinched a playoff spot, you are finishing out the season, I know the Eagles are in a position where they can't slip up and they still got to win these games as they chase the division title and the number 1 seed. But from a coaching standpoint, is there any sort of preparation for postseason that starts to happen once you know you're in it?
No, not in this situation. Like if this team had locked up the number 1 seed, they're trying to preserve players. Certain guys, hey, you're not going this week. That you're starting to detail game plans in practice. You're trying stuff out with the scout team. There's a certain period for plays that were successful. Like there are certain things that you can do, but in this situation, you're still fighting for a number 1 seed. So all of those things are out the window, and you're not playing well. So all of the attention should be, let's get the defense in unison with everyone healthy. Let's get a consistent offense where Jalen is going through his progressions consistently and not missing and leaving throws on the field. There's a lot to clean up. And the Eagles, as is today, is a one-and-done playoff team. They have to clean up a lot of things offensively and defensively, and they're not in the position to worry about the playoffs.
Gotcha. All right. Good stuff. And being one and done would really suck for the Eagles and their fans. But do you guys know what also sucks?
I didn't say that's going to happen. I'm saying that the way that they're playing right now doesn't mean that they can't get better.
Right. No, I was just trying to use that as a cute segue into the Game Time app, Jay.
Oh, sorry.
One and done sucks, but what also sucks is trying to find good tickets online. And that's why you need Game Time. It's the fast, easy way to buy tickets for sporting events, concerts, and theater shows near you. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And right now on the Game Time app, you're just 2 taps away with the phone, right? 2 taps. From tickets to seeing the Flyers, Sixers, maybe some Eagles playoffs, some shows in town, anything. So the best part is Game Time offers event cancellation protection and even job loss protection. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. Their all-in prices show you the total up front, and you can see the view from your seat. You know exactly what to expect at checkout. Game Time is obsessed with helping you save money. They've got the zone deals that let you pick the section while Game Time picks the seats for the best savings. And with the Game Time guarantee, if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code BIRDS, BIRDS, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the redeem code BIRDS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. Sorry about that, Jay. I definitely didn't mean to put words in your mouth. I was just trying to come up with a nice little fancy segue there.
No, you're good.
All right, good stuff. All right, we're going to take a round.
Our fans, Jason think that we're going to be right? Stone him off with his head.
Some do.
I'm like one of those aggregators who just takes like one snippet of something you say and puts a big headline out. We get victimized by that all the time. All right. We are going to take a quick look around happenings around the NFL. Our segment sponsored by Garage Beer. It's beer flavored beer. Find yours at drinkgaragebeer.com. So, Adam, we were talking a little bit. I think Jason brought up the whole Sean Payton never had to yell at Drew Brees with the way he did Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is now a benched backup quarterback. He went into it. He talked to the media this week. He said they approached him during the bye week about redoing his contract. He doesn't want to. Now he's getting benched for Jarrett Stidham. What do you see as the future now for Russell Wilson, who seems like he's far from the guy who was going to back-to-back Super Bowls?
Yeah, look, he got away with a lot with Seattle. I know talking to Seahawks over the years, he would run around, make plays. He wouldn't run the plays sometimes like they were drawn up. It would drive people crazy, but yet he was a spectacular player. As much he was probably better legs, fresher legs back then. He's played some good football this season. But the bottom line is, they knew when they did this contract 2 years ago with his agent, Mark Rogers, he only has one football player. Mark Rogers is a baseball agent, and it's Russell Wilson. He had Russell Wilson for baseball. Obviously, he has him for football. And Rodgers wanted a fully guaranteed contract. That was rebuffed, but he did a good job here, though. He had specific language, which would make it, you don't want to say impossible. They could cut him, but the massive dead money, if they cut him in March before the guarantee for 2025 kicks in, his money for 24 is fully guaranteed. The money for 25 becomes fully guaranteed on March 18th. If they cut him, then the dead cap hit, they could use a post-June 1 designation. It's still $85 million, which is by far the biggest in NFL history, but they'd split over 2 seasons. It'll cripple their cap. They're not going to want to do that. So you asked about the future. Everything Russell Wilson does is on tape. Every team knows the way he plays. He's a declining player. No one's going to trade for the contract. They may say, hey, Russ, here's what we're going to do. Yes, you're owed $37 million this season. We'll pay it, but we're not going to pay it the way you want it. We want to convert to a signing bonus, make it more palatable to our cap. Now that may happen, but no one's taking that contract because he's a declining player. I could just tell you the frustration I would get from talking to people who work with him. They like him personally, but if it's a 3-step drop, the ball's got to be out 1.7 seconds, not 4. This is not a coaching issue. Sean Payton goes off. You saw what he did on the sidelines. He's frustrated. What I don't understand is if you threaten to bench him during the bye, if he didn't restructure his contract or redo it and change the vesting date, why did you allow him to play more 8 weeks? Yeah. Why was he allowed to keep playing? I don't understand that.
And then they won some games, bizarre. So it looked even worse. Not because he was playing great, but they won games. So normally in this situation, right, when you're going to take
Russell Wilson didn't give up 70 points, man.
No, that defense was awful. But the defense over the last 10 weeks has been one of the best in the NFL, Jay. Their defense has been a really big part of their turnaround. But normally, to Adam's point, if you're going to take a massive cap hit, which it seems like the Broncos are prepared to do, then you're either going to be on a rookie quarterback or a one-year veteran who doesn't make a lot of money. The Broncos are not going to be picking in the top 10. Do you see them being aggressive, though, to try to trade up, Adam, to try to get one of these top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the because Sean Payton needs a quarterback. I don't think he wants to do the whole Josh McDaniels thing and just go with veterans.
Remember, they gave up a lot to go get him from Seattle 2 years ago, and it's
great point.
I don't have their draft picks in front of them, but the problem is if it's not a rookie, let's say it's a second. Let's say they have their second rounder. Mm-hmm. And it's only December, so we don't know about the quarterback landscape, but it's going to have to be on a cheap deal because they're not be able to afford it. And then you have some issues where you have some high-priced veterans they probably want to keep, but because their cap's going to be destroyed, they may have to cut them. So Sean Payton, I don't know how much he understood about the contract for Russell Wilson, but he had to know from watching his tape this may not work.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about, and it's not like he did, of course, he yelled at Drew Brees before. It's not like he's never yelled at him. Mm-hmm. But Drew Brees, for the most part, ran the play like he was supposed to.
Right.
And Greg knows this, Jay knows this, you know this from talking to coaches, and Jay knows as a former player who worked on offense. Over time, when a quarterback does not run the play the way you want it, either he's going to be benched, cut, or the guy's got a contract which you know he can't cut, so you have to play the guy. And the latter is clearly what's happened here.
Yeah,
awesome.
Can I jump in there?
And say please do.
Is that I respect what everyone has done, what Sean Payton's done in the NFL, what Bill Belichick has done in the NFL. But let's get something straight. When you have a Hall of Fame quarterback, it's easier to do this job. It's easier, right? I just don't think that he's on a Mike Tomlin level. He's not on a Coach Reed level with guys that can get the best out of players and figure out ways to construct offense and get the best out of a team when they're not well. If the quarterback isn't great, Sean Payton isn't a great coach. And that's and we have to and I don't know, it takes someone to say that, but everybody can coach out front.
To your point, Jay, even with Drew Brees, you had a couple of lean years in there. He had a couple of either borderline playoff, or I think they missed the playoffs once or twice with Drew. They had, and that's something that Bill and Andy never had to deal with. So to your point, despite changing in personnel. So that is a good point. And it just makes you wonder how patient he'll be before he has to have another really good quarterback so he can kind of get back to that level.
Well, he won't be coaching there that long, because based on him without a premier quarterback and unless you get Caleb Williams or the guy, and that's the only, Greg may say, someone else, and I would, refer to him, but I don't see many guys that you can draft that's going to come in there and do better than what Russell Wilson is doing now. So with that being said, if you're not making a move for one of these quarterbacks that has a proven track record, they're not winning.
Yeah, I don't know. This might be one of the rare times I disagree. I watched 3 or 4 Broncos games this year, and I just thought Russell was just really bad at times. And even some wins. I thought he was terrible. I felt like a rookie might, with a fresh set of eyes and, not 6 years of either regression or different coaches or whatever, just come in. And I guess we'll see. Jarrett Stidham's going to play, and we'll see if that makes any difference. But to your point, Jay, I'll ask Greg. Greg, give me a quarterback you really like. Obviously, the names we hear are Drake May, Caleb Williams, and then Jaden Daniels. Any one of those guys jump out at you?
Well, the only way I can answer that is, obviously I watch games on TV, but I did all these guys this past summer, and I'll get to them obviously when the NFL season ends. I can't do that during the NFL season. So I probably watched 7 or 8 games of 9 or 10 of the quarterbacks that are being discussed, including the top guys. So, and you guys know me well enough to know I don't necessarily like to make lists and say he's my number 1, he's my number 2, he's my number 3. But the quarterback that really stood out to me in my mind when I was finished watching all of them and said, if this guy really continues to improve, I could easily see him being in the conversation for the number 1 pick in the draft, was Jaden Daniels. And obviously he had a really good season. I haven't seen the tape, but, he just seeing him on TV and, he had a really good season. So I'm very curious to see how it all plays out. Right now, teams, other than the scouts, the area scouts and maybe some, college personnel directors, the teams haven't really gotten involved in this yet, where, the head coach, the position coaches. So we can't, any list now doesn't mean anything. But I'm just telling you what I saw based on studying 2022 tape, and I'm really looking forward to diving into the 2023 tape, which I'll probably be able to start getting to in about 3 weeks.
Gotcha. So the Heisman Trophy winner from LSU, Jaden Daniels.
Really like
good stuff.
Tape a lot, yeah.
Awesome. All right, back to the Eagles here. I want to talk about their defense against this Arizona Cardinals offense. And if you go back to last week, outside of the late mishap, we'll call it, from Reed Blankenship, the Eagles did appear a little more fundamentally sound on the back end. They were without Slay, no Nick Morrow, no Zach Cunningham. So that put a lot of pressure on linebackers to step in. Shaq Leonard, who was a newcomer, and Ben Van Sumeren, an undrafted rookie who had not played on defense until last week. So let's talk about this, Greg. What did you see from the linebacker level for the Eagles last week, or Monday, I should say?
I thought Van Sumeren was really, really good. Again, I don't know what Jay thought. I thought that he played about as well as any Eagles linebacker this year in a given game. He's a sudden, twitchy athlete. He can come downhill with burst and explosion and come to balance, which he did a number of times. He showed some. This is what surprised me. I didn't do him coming out of Michigan State, so I don't know. But he showed some strength and pop in his hands, taking on and shedding O-line blocks and making plays in the run game. I thought as a run defender that he was really good. And obviously they played a team that wasn't necessarily a great passing team. So, I can't speak for how he might play if he was in there in pass, but he wasn't because they played dime a lot. So he didn't play in those situations, but he played in base and he played in nickel. And I actually thought he played really, really well.
How do they do, Greg, in their dime packages in nickel? What do you think of their sub packages last week?
Well, they moved Bradbury inside, as you guys know. I mean, on the outside, they played Ricks and Ringo, and on the inside they played Roby and Bradbury. And when they did play man, Bradbury, versus 11 personnel, Bradbury was the tight end matchup. He would match up to Waller, who beat him a couple of times on in-breaking routes. So that was the structure of their dime defense, that Bradbury went inside. Look, I think they're trying to get a feel for Ricks and Ringo. I mean, Ringo was a 4th-round pick. Ricks was an undrafted free agent, but he was a big-time recruit going to LSU, then went to Alabama. And Ricks is not a slot. I think we've discussed that, and we know that he's not a slot. For him to make it in this league, and obviously we don't know that, but he would have to be an outside corner. So, look, they're trying to get a feel here. They've got old corners. The bottom line is, I spoke to someone this week who basically told me that Bradbury should not be on the field. So, and by the way, the Eagles know that. This stuff you hear, everybody knows this stuff.
Right.
This is not a scoop,
right.
But they're kind of stuck. So, he's got to be on the field. So the question is, how do you use him?
And I thought it was a really good decision by putting him on Waller in that situation. Waller runs well. He did beat him a couple times. But I thought it was a good decision. That was the first adjustment that I saw that was made. I was like, all right, that makes sense. At least you're not asking a guy to do something that he's not capable of doing.
Right.
And yeah, so you guys know how I feel. I think Bradbury, he definitely is declining, and I just think people have expected more out of someone that just didn't have it.
Yeah. What about to the point on being a little bit more fundamentally sound in the back end? Yes, we saw Reed Blankenship very poorly play the pass that turned into the touchdown. But when we talk about this back end, Jay, we're constantly talking about 2 guys covering 1 guy and then another guy not getting covered, bunch of formations, motions. It seemed like there was a more disciplined effort.
No, I'll say this, and I think I said it last week. The last few weeks, there's been less mental error. There's been more competition. And that's the thing that the Eagles haven't had most of the year is competition on throws where guys are near enough to make a play. I think Keely Ringo competes his butt off. And you can tell that he wants to be out there. And I think that based on the last few games that he's been out there, he's in better position than Bradbury ever would be. So I think that when Slay comes back, I think that your deployment will be Keely Ringo and Darius Slay. And I think that gives you the better chance to win.
Right.
And so overall, they're contesting more plays. There's more competition on the back end, which you like to see in the NFL. Arm's length is usually the amount of separation in this league it should be.
Right.
Well, and you have to keep in mind, and by the way, I personally like the fact that they're playing Ringo and Ricks because I think you have to find out to some degree what they can do, but they're also not playing big-time passing games. I mean, in the first half, obviously DeVito got benched because he just didn't throw the football. I mean, at some point when you drop back, and I've talked about this before, one of my biggest pet peeves is when you watch a game and the announcer tells you that no one's open. That's rarely ever the case. DeVito wasn't seeing it and he didn't throw the football. And then Taylor came in and he threw the football and he actually completed some balls because you know what? He threw the football. But in the first half of the game, DeVito just did not throw the ball. My guess is that's why he got benched, not because he stinks or any. It's just that when you call plays and your quarterback drops back and doesn't throw the ball, it's
a problem.
Tough deal.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a problem. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Greg, on Ricks, how you and I talked about this last week. So we have a little. Yes, the passing game for the Giants wasn't great. I know it's a small sample size, but how's Ricks moving to you? Because not just Ricks, I'm sorry, Ringo as well. We'll start with Ringo. How's Ringo look off tape to you so far?
I think to me, Ringo's looked a little better, and I know they're working with him because I've talked to people in the building. I know they're working with him because when he came out, and, we probably talked about him when he came out and we did draft shows, but,
Yep.
You're dealing with a guy that's a big, physical, competitive athlete, okay? I agree 100% with Jay. This kid competes. I thought in college, because he played, on a really good defense with a lot of NFL concepts. Georgia is one of the few teams that actually has true NFL concepts. I thought he was far more comfortable playing press man, both mirror match and physical. Where he had issues was in off coverage. He didn't have a great feel for routes and where they break. He lost leverage a lot. He lost assignment discipline. And when he played off coverage and he had vertical stems running at him, he struggled to stop because he's so stiff in the hips. I think he's been much better at that. I think it's been worked on. He's never going to be a loose, fluid athlete. He just does not have that body type, but you can improve his ability to stop. And I think you're seeing that a little bit. I mean, I'm curious to see Ringo's development. I personally thought he got drafted where he should have gotten drafted based on doing his tape study. Obviously, Adam, as you know, a lot of people started talking about him as a top 20 pick. As soon as I watched him on tape and I'm looking at my notes, I actually watched like 9 games because Georgia's defense always has a ton of guys. Once I finished the tape study, I knew he was not going to be a top 50 pick because he just didn't show that in college.
And that stuff, look, that stuff will show up. And also, there were some off the field concerns with him, which made there's just no way he was going higher than the 4th. But I'm interested to see, Geoff, when they come back here after this week, and actually, technically, once Slay comes back,
right?
How are they going to use these guys? Because Bradbury is healthy, but he clearly, if he didn't have this contract, shouldn't be playing. Right. So, do they have the guts to say, you know what? Now again, Ringo's got to play today. And we'll see. Kyler Murray is always capable. And then you play the Giants again, which should be Tyrod Taylor again, who when he sees it, sometimes he will throw it downfield. So we'll probably get another sample. And Slay right now, he didn't even practice this week, so I don't know about next week. But I'm anxious to see and anticipating what these coaches will do. It would take a lot of guts to bench Bradbury at this point, but I would say never say never.
Yeah, no, I agree. And
I'm sorry. I was going to say I did Ricks too coming out of college as well. Ricks was another big time guy. He came out of IMG Academy in Florida after transferring from Mater Dei in California, which is another big time school. So he was a 5-star. He's another guy. He's long, and see, coaches like length at outside corner. He has size. He has length. He has the overall movement traits to project well. He's another guy who was at his best playing press, because a lot of these long guys, their transition, their change of direction isn't exactly what you want. And Ricks was kind of like that, but it's why he can't play in the slot. I mean, I know they played him there, but he struggled big time.
Right. And I think to your guys' point, we might be having this conversation for a couple of weeks where we are trying to reconcile whether or not this refurbished secondary has really taken a step and improved and eliminated the mistakes, or if it's simply a byproduct of playing teams that don't do passing very well, which is the case here over the last 3 weeks. And even Seattle, which was on a backup quarterback, I mean, this is just 2 games ago. Yeah, the Eagles were more fundamentally sound, but Seattle did convert, I think, 4 3rd and 10s in that game, and they had some playmakers. So we're just going to have to see as these games. I think we can only learn one thing. If the Eagles struggle for whatever reason today against Kyler Murray in passing game, or next week if it's Tyrod Taylor, that's an alarm. But if they're very good, it sort of feels like we come back to the same discussion of, well, it was just the Giants and the Cardinals.
I think we only can get better. I believe Vontae Max is playing today.
Yep.
Yes.
So that's hopefully he can stay healthy.
Yeah.
But that's a big, lift for this secondary, getting him back, another sound football player. And, for some odd reason, Keely Ringo or Eli Ricks, one of these guys come in and solidifies a spot where it's just not an automatic catch.
Mm-hmm.
This team is in a lot better position to be able to compete especially with the lead. Because if you can get into dime personnel and you got a tight end matchup in Bradbury and you got a good nickel matchup and Avonte Maddox, but you have to get to a lead in order to deploy a defense like that. So there are some positive things that can come out of all of these injuries if they can get healthy in time.
Sure. And Greg, let's finish up the sort of the pass defense on this, because I want to ask you about Arizona's passing offense. Without Marquise Brown, they clearly lack a guy who could threaten the Eagles over the top. I don't think this is a team that uses the same kind of motion and bunch formations that you would see out of the Rams or the 49ers, but I'll ask you.
They don't really
what's the matchup to maybe be concerned about here?
Yeah, I mean, Moore is kind of their movable chess piece. Rondell Moore, he's a little guy. He's deployed in multiple locations, including the backfield. They'll direct snap to him on occasion. He's used as their motion player more often than not. They do not have a vertical player. I really like Michael Wilson, the kid out of Stanford, who's, but he's not a vertical guy. But I think if he was in a good passing offense, we would be talking a lot more about him as a young receiver that could be a really good player. Runs routes well, big kid, physicality to him. They're playing Dortch, who's a Wake Forest kid who's about 5'8", 5'9". He's been there for a couple of years. Probably their best weapon, the way they've been playing the last number of weeks, is the tight end Trey McBride. And McBride, he's got the skill set and the traits to line up all over the formation. They use him on intermediate routes. At Colorado State, he lined up as the boundary X. He can, he can win outside. So he's probably the number one weapon for them over the last couple of weeks. But they really do not have a true vertical dimension in their offense.
Yeah, he's he's their leading receiver right now.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. By far. There's a few plays that Rondell Moore, he just doesn't understand the game. He just doesn't. Like, give
me an example.
He had a inside fade against the Bears. It was a one-on-one. Got the
play.
Yep. Perfect coverage. The dude just ran to the sideline.
Yeah.
Tried to avoid the contact, not have the feel. And you can see it on intermediate routes, not understanding zones and windows. He's just a guy that was deployed as a utility player and never learned the nuance of playing the game. And him and guys like Tavon Austin, they frustrate me so much. The reason they frustrate me is because they have the skill set to do it. It's just that there's something in them that can't slow down and just get like the simple way to play. And I think you have to be a lesser athlete to get those things sometimes. I don't know what it is, but it's a very frustrating thing because I'm like, dude, you can play for a long time if you can just get it.
They have a bunch of guys, including Moore, though, and Murray is the same, that can make individual plays once in a while, okay?
Right.
And that's what you always have to be careful about. You asked me early on about Murray, and we can revisit him if you want, but, that's what you have to worry about. You watch the Cardinals offense, there's no sustainability to it, although we definitely need to talk about the run game. They run the ball very, very well. And James
we're getting up to that next.
Way better back than I don't want to jump the gun here, Jeff, but I mean, James Conner is a way better back than people might give him credit for. I'll stop and let you.
It's a great segue.
Yeah.
I was about to say, if there's one area where this Cardinals team is probably going to try to play to its strengths against the Eagles, it would be its running game. I did want to ask one. I do want to get back to one thing though. I want Jay's question back to the defense that we were talking about. Matt Patricia,
real quick. Inactives. Can I give you the inactives? There's actually one big surprise.
Okay.
Big surprise. Bradley Roby's inactive.
Because Maddox is back.
Right.
Maddox
so that gets your answer. What would they do with Roby? Well, he's a healthy inactive. Darius Slay, of course, McKee, Dean, Tyler Steen, Marlon Tuipulotu, small surprise. And of course, Zach Cunningham. So I just want to jump in there because that's a big one with Roby. So now we know if Max is up, Roby probably won't be. So I guess that means that Ricks is the backup slot.
Well, it also, I mean, if Bradbury is going to play inside,
Bradbury's
maybe
maybe moved inside.
Yeah, you'll have Maddox and Bradbury inside, and maybe Ricks and Ringo on the outside.
That's what they'll do.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right, interesting stuff. And so along those lines, Jay, I believe Matt Patricia has only blitzed 5 times so far in the total 2 games. And the Eagles aren't exactly generating a great front 4 rush. We've been talking about that a lot. Has it surprised you that he has been far less of a blitzer than even Sean Desai, who didn't blitz a whole lot, but was more selective with his blitzes.
No, you need good players to blitz.
But you also need a great front four rush.
yeah. Well.
If you're not gonna.
Well, they're going to get there eventually. That's what the defense coordinator said. He was like, they'll get there eventually. And I just think that our secondary needs 7 players back. I just think that that's like the optimal way to kind of protect against our, the lack of players at times back there. So so in order to blitz, this is what you have to be confident in. You got to be confident that you can play your leverage correctly and you can make the tackle. How many times last night, I don't know if you guys watched the Detroit Cowboys game last night with Glenn as the defensive coordinator, how many times the Cowboys were 1 tackle away from scoring a touchdown? It was a lot last night where, and CeeDee Lamb got him a few times, but they were a lot of situations where there's 1 tackle away. And here's the thing. Do you trust our guys to make that tackle?
Right. That's a good question.
Exactly. What I'm telling you is that Matt Patricia doesn't think that they'll do it.
Right.
That's what I'm telling you. Right. Okay. So in order to blitz, you need players on the back end, that are assignment pure, that if I call this blitz, at the worst, we'll get them down.
Right. Right. All right. Well, if you're not going to blitz, though, then what you're basically saying is I need my front four to get home. That is how the Eagles were built. They had 70 sacks last year. It really worked for them this year. And I don't want to put it all on sacks because I know that is an individual stat. However, that is a big part of what they were doing last year. This year, they are 24th in the NFL in sacks per pass attempt. And as far as pressure percentage, 12th, which is better, but still not where you're used to seeing them, 10th in quarterback knockdown. So they're not generating, as we've talked about, a whole lot of pressure from their front four compared to what they've done in the past. And now, Greg, they're not blitzing even to the 20% area that they had been doing under Desai and even in Jonathan Gannon. So I feel like at some point, one of these things is going to have to get, something's going to have to get better here for this marriage of no blitzing and no front four to actually not haunt them, which it did.
But Jay's right. They're not going to increase their blitz significantly, if at all, because of the back end. You just can't do that. You can't cover up corner play that you're a little concerned about. I mean, we can talk about Ricks and Ringo all day long, and whether we like them or dislike them. The fact is, they're rookies. Okay, so you're playing right now to cover up your secondary. That's the way you're playing. And it's easy to say, oh, they got to blitz more. But you can't. And by the way, at some point, you also have to believe that some of these players up front who've shown that they can play are going to play. Whether it's this week, who knows what's going to happen. But you can't blitz more because you have to play to your secondary. Jay's right. You need 7 in coverage. Maybe once in a while you can throw a blitz in. Maybe you can do a zone exchange where you rush 4, and you still have 7 in coverage. But, you're playing to camouflage for the fact that you're still a little uncertain about your secondary.
And they sure weren't last year, Greg. One question on that. Josh Sweat, it's been puzzling how quiet he's been for several weeks. Is there anything you see off tape that's an issue?
I can tell you basically since going back to, week 9 when
since we praised them. Since we all praised them on the show.
Yeah.
That's what happened. We all praised them on week 9.
We did. We put the ITB jinx on them.
Yeah. It's like when they tell, when doing basketball and they tell you the guy hasn't missed a free throw, in 30 shots, and then of course he misses the next one. Yeah. But basically week 9 when they played the Cowboys, Tyron Smith ate him up, and he really has not been a factor as a pass rusher since. A part of me wonders too about that game against Buffalo where the defense played over 90 snaps and a lot of guys played a lot of snaps. I don't know, but the point is he has not been the same player as a pass rusher since week 9 as he was prior to week 9.
Yeah.
He's a tough guy to evaluate because when you look at the production that he normally has, you would think, okay, it's an injury. is something like, because guys go through problems in a season where they're dealing with hand injuries or something and they're down. But he has that gimp anyway, so it's kind of tough to look at him. It's like, oh, is he hurting? You can't really tell.
Right. Well, the one thing we can say is every single pass rusher who was on last year's team and is still on the Eagles is off his pace from last year in sacks. I mean, Hassan Reddick is paced for 12.5, which is pretty good, but he had 16 last year. But Sweat on pace for 7. That would be way lower than the 11 that he had. Brandon Graham had 11 last year. And he sometimes goes through games where you don't really hear his name a whole much. He's on pace for 3 sacks. So even Milton Williams, who I think at times we've said this year has played really well and has shown you some burst, is only on pace for a half of a sack. I think he has a half a sack throughout the whole year. So there's definitely.
I don't think Brandon Graham is getting the reps that he normally gets either, though.
He's not.
Let me ask you this. Does anybody know why Carter was not on the field on the Giants' final drive?
Great question.
And
some people felt it was disciplinary for a false start that he had earlier in the game, combined with the fact that he hasn't had as many pressures. Jay, you're giving me a look like you know something.
No, it's a good question by Greg, because it's been a few weeks now.
Yeah,
there's like, and I think we brought it up on the Q&A show. Like, there's times where Milton Williams is playing more snaps than he is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Weird.
Well, I'm going to go. Yeah, I mean, remember we talked about last week in the most important part of the game, the touchdown from Drew Lock to Jackson Smith Najigba. The two interior rushers were Moro Ajomo and Milton Williams on that, not Fletcher Cox, not Brandon Graham, not Jalen Carter. So again, kind of interesting. It does seem like the younger guys, Jay, and you can speak to this, right? The younger guys who did not play a ton of snaps in college maybe are starting to feel that like length of the season here, which is way longer than a college season. And it feels like the older guys are starting to feel the brunt of playing a whole lot of snaps. I mean, I think Fletcher Cox has played more snaps this year already than he played last year and the year before. So you wonder if two opposite ends of the spectrum are both conspiring together against this defensive line.
Yeah. And let's give the other team credit too. Apparently, people have adjusted, and it seems like the Eagles are in the valley of countering, right? So
you mean by keeping players in? Like, what kind of adjustments have you seen?
Well, you never know the tendency of a particular player, right? You only can justify that is a decrease in production. So there could be something that a offense coordinator says, hey, listen, Josh Sweat, if you cut off this particular rush, it'll render him ineffective. Right? You never know what particular thing. I can't point to it on tape and say, hey, they're doing this. But what I'm saying is that there must be something out there that's saying, hey, there's some tendencies that that are being found that's able to stop them. You just don't have this abrupt of production stoppage. It's just happening too quick.
Yeah. Adam, I mean, we knew when Javon Hargrave was lost in free agency to San Francisco that it was going to be impossible for it would have been impossible anyway to replicate what the Eagles did last year. I mean, they had a whole bunch of variables that worked for them to be able to just tee off on quarterbacks. But I also don't think this feels like our running back DeAndre Swift comparison to, I don't think we saw it because all of a sudden you're seeing the Eagles in the bottom half of the league of sacks or anything like that. It's been a little bit of a mystery here.
Yeah, when we did our season preview shows, we said they won't be anywhere close to the amount of sacks as they got last year. There's just no way it's going to happen. But we didn't know it would be like this. This is hard to believe. Greg just talked about Josh Sweat and his fall here over the last 6 weeks. It's surprising. But the one thing we heard consistently from people who were watching Eagles tape was they don't collapse the pocket in the interior like they used to. Hargrave, he's a pass rush specialist. Carter's done a nice job. He's been inconsistent as a pass rusher. And Jordan Davis is not a pass rusher. So the quarterbacks at times, when it's a competent quarterback, not Tommy DeVito, sorry, when it's a competent veteran quarterback, they could step up because quarterbacks hate when there's pressure in their face because they can't step up. If they can step up, we've seen Bradbury get beat. We've seen other guys get beat. And that to me is something they're going to have to take a look at. Look, the bottom line is they have issues on this defense. We've all outlined the problems of the secondary, right? Everybody knows this. But what I don't think they probably calculated as much is the drop-off of the front. Because Sweat's back. Graham's come off a career year, but he's also older. And they didn't quite. Reddick's been fine, been solid, but they haven't got the high level play, and that's something of many things on this defense. When they have their personnel meetings in the offseason, they're going to have to come to the reality. You can't expect that type of production again. But how do you get back to something close to it? Either get better players, or you change your scheme, or get better blitzers, as Jason talked about. They have a lot of problems on defense, more than we anticipated.
Yeah. So, Greg, last week we talked about the marriage, right, between offense and defense. Last year, the Eagles jumped out to a lot of big leads, and that enabled the team they were playing against to be one-dimensional, and the Eagles could tee off. I'm also wondering about the marriage between run defense and pass rush, because earlier in the year, the Eagles have the best run defense in the NFL, and they were putting a lot of opponents in second and long, third and long, and their sacks, if you go through the first 5 or 6 weeks, were up there. They were one of the better pressure teams in the league. But if you look at the last 5, 6, 7 weeks, they're not nearly as stout against the run. They're not bad, but they have not been as stout against the run. In fact, I did the math here. For the first 7 weeks of the season, the Eagles had the #1 rush defense, and they were tied for third in yards per carry. Ever since, they are 24th in run defense and also yards per carry, and then 28th in sacks. So the fact that, to me, it stands out that they're not putting opponents in a whole lot of 2nd and 9, 3rd and 8 is making it difficult for just a tee-off mode for the pass rush. Why do you think? I mean, what do you see? Do you see teams running the ball better?
The games play out in that they're not up big in the second half. I mean, don't forget the offense can stay with the run game. The offense can stay with how they want to play. Last year they were up big in the second half. How many close games did they play last year? Not many at all.
Not very many.
Not very many, and that changes the dynamic of games totally. This year I read a stat which was very interesting that I guess for a team. I can't remember the point of the stat was that for a really good team, they've not won one game by more than 14 points.
Yeah.
Did you see that stat?
Yeah.
I heard actually someone had it and put it on X. Yes.
Yeah. So they've played a lot of close games, Jeff. And when you do that, teams can stay with their offensive approach. They don't have to abandon it. They don't have to come out throwing the football and feeling like, they're throwing it. The other stat I'd be curious, and maybe it would blow this all up. I don't know the answer, but I'm just throwing it out. I wonder how many pass attempts versus run plays they faced in the second half of games this year. Because my guess is last year the number was probably skewed heavily toward pass attempts.
Right.
That would be my guess without seeing the numbers, right in front of me.
Right. Jay, anything jump out to you as why the Eagles have not been as stout against the run for the last few weeks? And of course, this parlays to Greg's point about Arizona's running game is pretty good today. That's the only way Arizona can probably stick in this game.
Well, they're averaging 5 yards a carry pretty much. Yeah. So, but they're always playing from behind, so they can't get to it. So yes, if they can keep this game close, it's a problem for sure. Here's the thing that I don't think we do a great job with double teams. And I think every team that have played us, I would say the last 5 or 6 weeks, have been able to move us, displace us up front.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So I think they have to figure that out. I know Greg said, how do you say his name? Sumarin.
Van Sumeren.
Yeah, Ben Sumeren.
Yeah, Ben Van Sumeren.
Definitely played well for the most part. There are times that I thought that he was a second late when it comes to reading. And here's the thing. That's what happens when you're a younger player. You don't get as many reps. But when you're talking about double teams, it's all about how fast the linebacker can see it so the other guy can't sift off to him. Right. And the other aspect of that, let's look at our ends. We get one end in Hassan Reddick that can be blocked man to man by a tight end.
Yeah. Yep.
So you get double teams, right? So you're going to get the defensive tackles displaced, and now you get stalemates from the tight end position. That leads to gaps. So usually you need a butt kicker at defensive end in order to stop tight end blocks or one-on-one blocks, so you can get back there. You can get more pressure in the backfield. So those are the things I think teams are figuring out. We haven't figured out a way to stop double teams.
I think that's
what did you guys?
What I was going to say was Jordan Davis, when it's truly one-on-one, has had some dominant snaps. But he has a tendency to stand up when it's double teams. And no matter how big and strong he is, and we know all this, but when you stand up, you get moved. And he gets moved on double teams. He's really, like I said, you can pick out 3-4 plays a game where it's 1-on-1, and he is a dominant run defender. And he has those plays every game. But when he gets double teamed, he tends to straighten up, and that's when you lose all your leverage and power.
The last point I'll make about that, Greg, and because I agree with you, the last point I'll make is that there are times where you don't have to block our ends because they're not disciplined. Right? Let's give an example. There was a play last game where we needed a stop. Hassan Reddick came off the edge, went straight for the running back, and got it on the 4th down. It wasn't a disciplined football play. And it's going to bite us at one of these points.
That reminds me of the 49ers play last year when he hit Brock Purdy.
At some point, because the quarterback can keep the ball and roll out to that side. The guy that's coming in motion can beat him with a jet sweep. Like, there's so many different deployments that are happening, and I think they're the double teams and them being able to attack our edges. We give up a lot of yards off tackle. A lot of
Now, Brandon Graham used to be a really good, he still is, I think, when he's a good edge-setting defensive end, but as we pointed out, he doesn't play as much as he used to, and you wonder if maybe he needs to see some more first down or run down snaps, Jay.
Here's the thing with Brandon Graham. His production is high considering how much he's deployed, how much he's used. It's always been that way. I just think that some guys, you look at it and you say, this guy's older and we want some younger guys to play. And I think he's just in that situation. I think another team that needs a pass rusher, that can get him in a rotation, he will play a lot of snaps. But I just think that they have made up in their mind that we're going to give, other guys more opportunities. And that's that is what it is.
Greg, you were talking about Arizona, and their strength is, if there's one, their running game. They can run the ball. Jay mentioned they're behind in a lot of games, so they abandon it. What have you? I was one who was never. I have to say, I'm more appreciative of James Conner now. When he went to Arizona, I always felt he was a volume carrier. Like, he would get 1,000 yards, but average 3.7, 3.8 per carry. But he appears to be having a pretty good year.
To me, he's always run well when given an opportunity, Jeff. There were stretches in Pittsburgh. I remember one year where for 5 or 6 games in a row, he was sort of the foundation back, and maybe he got hurt after that. I can't remember. But, he had 18, 20 carries a week for 5, 6 weeks in a row. I think that, Conner he's got the traits to work both inside and outside. He's at his best between the tackles. He's got short area burst. He's got some natural power to him. They will line up and run the ball, and it's a pretty multiple run game. They don't just do one thing. So, you do have to defend the run when you play them. And you can say what you want about Murray, and I don't think Murray's, I agree with Jay. You could say Murray's not really been the guy, but, you have to, he's always a weapon in the design quarterback run game, and the threat of him as a runner presents alignment and discipline challenges for the defense. You've got to have a plan for defending the zone read because he's explosive when he gets to the edge. There's no question about it. And he's more of an individual player than a sustaining kind of quarterback, but he can make those great individual plays, and you have to be careful about that.
Yeah. One thing that's strange about Kyler Murray, Greg, I always find is that despite all that tremendous athleticism and his mobility, he gets sacked quite a bit. So that may be byproduct of the style that he plays, the offensive line, but only 7 quarterbacks have been sacked more than him since 2019 when he entered the league, and 4 of them have played more games. So on a per-game basis, he might even be higher than that.
He does not have a really good feel in the pocket. Obviously he's got great movement and can run around, but he gets stuck a lot in the pocket. And when he gets stuck, as it starts to squeeze him because he's so small, he just can't see, and he gets sacked. Now, he's always been sacked a lot. A lot of the smaller quarterbacks, unless they play with great rhythm and timing, Russell Wilson got sacked a lot too. Drew Brees is an exception, and obviously he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He had a really refined sense, the highest level sense of timing and rhythm. But, if you get stuck in the pocket and you're 5'10", boy, it's just really hard to get out of there because everybody around you is so much bigger.
Yeah, and not to mention that the guys you're throwing to, how tall is Rondale Moore, or how short shall I say?
5'7". He's 5'7".
I think
Greg
Dortch is 5'8" or 5'9" as well.
Yeah, I mean, what are we doing here?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Hollywood Brown's small too, explosive, small.
Well, the rules permit the guys to play, and it's just the way that the NFL changed. The legal contact, the lack of you get a penalty for playing defense now, right? So you're going to get a bunch of guys that in yesteryear wouldn't be able to make it and stay in a league a long time. So you're going to get these guys that are playing.
Is this an offensive player right here complaining about the way defensive? All right, I love it.
I'm just keeping it real. I get so frustrated at times when I hear things like Randy Moss, and I love Randy Moss. And and the modern era players, like when Jerry Rice played, it was a different time. The safeties literally try to end your career.
Yeah,
they can hold you until the ball was in the air. It was a different time, and I think that it's different. It's like playing in the NBA, like when you had hand checking and no defense 3 seconds. It's a different game.
Yeah. Well, fortunately for Jerry, Jay, one of those safeties was his teammate, so he didn't have to worry about Ronnie Lott coming down on him unless it was a practice.
It was a lot of a-holes playing,
but it was a lot of guys. It was definitely. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about this Eagles defense versus the Arizona offense. Just want to stop to remind everybody that James and Zach have been behind the wheels. Again, our great production team, they've been bringing Inside the Birds pregame live to you in high definition with new graphics, videos, and more. And we just want to thank them for all of their work behind the scenes to bring this great show to life. If you want them to help you out with your podcast, your visual show, anything, your YouTube channel, email us at insidethebirds@gmail.com, and we will certainly pass them your information along to them. So thank you again, James and Zach. Finishing up here on this Eagles defense against Arizona offense. So they have a new offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, Adam, and he comes from the Kevin Stefanski tree, correct? So that would sort of explain why their run game looks a little bit different and is more prominent when it's at its best.
Right. In fact, on the run game, when they brought Jeff Swayman, I'm like, oh, here's your wide tight end. That's why they signed him.
Yeah.
Right. McBride move and keep Swayman. And I know it was a minor signing, but it was big to them, I could tell you for a fact. Yeah, he's running his version of it. It's supposed to be a heavy 12 personnel and 2 receivers. And Drew's a young guy. This is a very young staff. D coordinator is 30. OC is 36. Youngest coordinator team in the National Football League. And Connor's done by the way, this tells you all you need to know about their pass game that we can move on. James Conner led them in receiving last week. That can't happen. He's really a fun player. But you need explosive plays. And the fact, the Cardinals actually were getting crushed, and then they came back to make it respectable. But they're so offensively challenged, as you said, Jeff, earlier. And you'll see DeMarcado, who takes some time with Michael Carter on third downs. But Connor's been a bell cow, man. What a great story he's been for them.
Yes, he has.
And by the way, he's got a screen game. They're a pretty good screen team.
Oh, what's that like?
Yeah, they're pretty good.
I got that one.
That's great. Maybe the Eagles could take some notes. All right, we are going to wrap this up. Let me just remind everybody about our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation. We're going to get into our player of the game segment. Of course, it's sponsored by our friends at Garage Beer. It's beer, tasting beer. Find yours at drinkgaragebeer.com. Let us start with you, Jason. Who is your player? It took you long enough to get it in. So who's going to be your player of the game?
Hey, man, listen, I would have got it in, man, but they're treating me better over here, man. They got me in the Ritz-Carlton. I'm feeling good, man.
I don't think we can compete with that.
I'm just messing. My player of the game is A.J. Brown. I think that this team, has a affinity to try to give him the ball, and I don't think there's a way that the Cardinals can stop that, and I think he's the first option.
All right, A.J. Brown, big game for A.J. Brown, according to our resident wide receiver, Jason Avant. Greg Cosell, who's going to be the player of the game?
Great minds think alike. I had A.J. Brown as well, because again, with Thomas and Hamilton at corner, and we know that Brown likes to vocalize every once in a while about getting the football. I think that you'll see him targeted early and often.
All right. So says our wide receiver tape breakdown expert. Adam Caplan, who is going to be the player of the game today?
It'll be Jalen Hurts in the run and pass game. He's going to have a huge game. And by the way, the Eagles have only had 2 games where they've won by more than 10 points. To Greg's point earlier, that's what kind of game or season it's been for them. But this is a game Hurts is going to go off.
All right. Like 200 passing, 100 rush, or 80 rushing, maybe, like something big like that.
Oh, 300, some big plays here. Yeah. Goddard, too. Goddard, by the way, Cole Kmet had over 100 yards last week in the first half against the Cardinals.
All right. There you go. I am going to stay on the ground, and he's going to get his 1,000 yards today. He's going to have a touchdown because, as Jay said, he's going to fight for it. DeAndre Swift is going to become DeAndre 1000 today and get his 1,000-yard rushing season. He will be the player of the game as I see it. Let's get into our picks. The Eagles, as I mentioned, from our friends at MyBookie, 10.5-point favorites and over-under of 48. Greg, who wins? You're in the lead here. You're 13-2 this year. Don't let us down.
The Eagles are going to win this game. I believe I picked 27-17.
You did.
Is that what I picked?
Did.
Yeah, the Eagles.
You did.
I mean, I'd be... To me, the Eagles would have to turn the ball over a ton, or there'd have to be big-time special teams plays by the Cards. I just think that the Eagles are, they're just a better team.
Yeah, well, the first of those two is definitely possible as they've turned the ball over quite a bit this year.
Last week we
We'll see. All right, so you don't have them covering because it's 10.5. You have them winning by 10 and the under with a total of, my math tells me that would be, 54?
No, 44.
Sorry, 44. Sorry.
And they can score well more than that. I just, they've been so erratic. It was hard for me to pick them, getting 37, but they could easily do that.
Sure. There you go. Adam, what do you got?
I've got it 30-17, Eagles win.
All right. So that is a cover and a little bit on the under. Jason, who wins and by how much?
I got 31-17. I agree with Greg. I think that Kyler Murray is too sporadic in order to stay in offense. That's the one thing you see on tape. It's pretty, as an offense coordinator, I would be pretty frustrated with the way we're running offense. It's basically like football. It's definitely a tough watch. But yeah, 31-17 Birds.
All right, so a cover and right at the total of 48. I'm also giving the Eagles a cover today. They're going to win 33-16. 1 tiny point over the over there. So like that. All right, big thanks as always to Garage Beer, HelloFresh, Game Time, Manscaped, PHL Sports Nation, James and Zach, and thanks to all of you for watching us. Enjoy your football today. Have a happy new year. Make sure you still check out coverage of today's game immediately after. We've got Inside the Birds post-game live, myself, Adam, Clay Harbor, and of course on insidethebirds.com, Andrew DeCecco will have it all covered there. And for Jason Avant, Greg Cosell, and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks for watching another Inside the Birds pregame live. Enjoy the game. Happy New Year.